Hello, family. How are you today? I'm so happy to be here for session 4. And we are in our third theme. So we're in the theme of school age learners, and we're talking about their challenges. And we have been talking about the challenges that they face. So today we are going to be talking about something that is, even though we're talking about children and school age learners today, we're going to be talking about a topic that impacts all of us because we all utilize it. So today's topic is going to be the impact of social media on mental health. And as I stated, we're going to make a special focus for our children, but this information applies to all of us, to children, to parents, their caregivers of children. So let's start discussing. Once again, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Quanisha Johnson. I'm a licensed counselor and educator. And let's talk about social media, something we're all using. Okay, here we go. So I wanted to break down this topic in different parts. And first, we're going to, as we're focusing on school age learners, we're going to give a specific focus to young children, and then we're going to transition into the impact for adolescents. So ultimately, when I think of children, young children, I think about like the beginning stages of allowing them to utilize social media in a healthy way. And so in the beginning stages, I call it the ABCDs. And so ABCD, as you can see, stands for we as the adults in their lives have to be able to acknowledge the benefits of social media while considering the dangers. So we're going to be kind of taking a little journey through what it looks like to acknowledge the benefits of social media while also considering the dangers of it. So the first thing we're going to do is acknowledge the benefits. So what are the benefits of social media, right? Everyone, as I stated earlier, utilizes it. And so there are benefits for our children. And the first benefit is really simplistic. Social media is about connecting. Our children are connecting. And so in a time that we're living in right now, where it is so challenging to connect physically, because we are distanced in so many ways because of our pandemic. And so, of course, we're not going to be able to get together the way that we were in the past. And social media allows our children, us as adults, to be able to make connections. And so social media, that's one of the benefits. It's about connecting. Another thing is, very simply, social media is fun. Our children want to utilize it because they get enjoyment and pleasure out of it. Once again, if we're correlating and connecting to our pandemic, what we're seeing is that, our children are at home. Some are able to go to school, whether it's a couple of days, some are home learning. And because of that, that time, or the time that we're living in, where they're not able to connect socially the way that they used to, social media sometimes is an outlet for them to have a good time. So on social media, our children can get together in groups. They can share their different experiences. There's games, watch videos, listen to music. There's so much you can do on social media. And so these are reasons our children love it. So that's why I wanted to break down the idea of acknowledging the benefits, because there are things that are beneficial for our children in terms of utilizing social media. Additionally, our children get to pursue different interests. There's so much on there. And so that's why there's so many different applications, and one child may like one app, another child likes something else. And so you're able to, depending on your interest with your child, pursue different areas and different ideas. And then right now, a lot of schools are utilizing Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And so ultimately, our children can receive updates about things going on in schools. So this is how we see social media was able to expand, because now even there's a connection with schools utilize it. They know that that is a way to connect with their students. And so you'll often see our children being able to get updates about what's going on through the lens of social media. And so utilizing social media, it helps our kids, our school age learners. And remember, we're starting off talking about young age, and we're going to transition through. It helps them and aids them in feeling smart and informed, because there's so much information on social media. They learn so much from it and they get so much from it. And it's a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge. And social media actually, right, there's studies and it makes kids smarter. Now, and I'll give you some examples of how. Aside from us talking about building social skills, right? Secondly, it can help to improve cognitive abilities, problem solving skills. They learn more, critical thinking, comprehension, and their memories are enhanced due to utilizing social media. For example, a child online will get to basically critically discern which information is useful and which information is not. So through the process of them learning, and once again, that's why we go the ABCDs, the early stages we're in right now. We're wanting to make sure that we're understanding how they're utilizing it, what the benefits are, and we don't want to just look at it from the standpoint of it's all bad, because there are so many good things about it. Our children are utilizing it, getting information, and once again, during this time, it can have its benefits in the sense of the connections, because there's nothing, of course, like that human interaction where you're able to go into an environment and interact. There's nothing like it. Our children thrive and strive from that. There's nothing like when you are a child in school, loving to learn, but loving to interact with your peers. It's so important. And right now, with what we're dealing with the pandemic, it is not easy for our children to be able to do that and then maintain a level of safety. And so we have to be mindful that this is what our children are getting from this experience. So then we talked about some of the benefits, right? Social media is fun. It's fun. There's so many things on there that are fun. I see everyone getting in on the TikTok world, from young to older. And so ultimately it's fun, there's information, there's knowledge, but we have to make sure that we're paying attention and we're considering what the dangers are for our children. And so ultimately, when I speak of danger, I think when we think of this topic today about mental health, we must tie in mental health with physical health, with emotional health. Every aspect of health must be intertwined, right? We can't be healthy and just be lacking in one area. So like, it is so important, of course, as a licensed therapist, I am pushing for our children to be mentally healthy, but absolutely wanting them to be physically healthy as well. And the physical healthy doesn't just mean I don't want them to fall and break their leg, but physically safe and secure, And so ultimately we must, when they're utilizing these channels of social media, that they're able to be safe. And so we, as the adults in their life, must consider the dangers. So for your information, I just want to give you a little bit of knowledge, because we, like I said, we're going to be talking about mental health, but we have to intertwine physical safety as well when it comes to our children. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Just throwing in a little information just so we're aware of what these things are. And basically, this act made it illegal for commercial websites and apps to allow children under 13 to open an online account without verifiable parental consent. So technically, our children are not really allowed to, without consent, go on and create an account, right? So a perfect example is if you have a school age learner who is under 13 years old, you may then, if your child is, the way that my child is, I have a 7-year-old, has the wherewithal, intelligence, remember they're critically thinking on here, they're having fun. wanting to do something online and he knows how to sign up, but then I will get an email that says that this user account, because my son at 7 knows how to make up a username, that I still have to give final permission for him to utilize this specific application. And so there is an Online Privacy Protection Act. And so there are things in place that attempt to protect our children. So this is created so companies can collect data about our children. And then once data is being collected, as we see as adults, then they're able to market, right? To market to them. And so this is the purpose of that. It's for protection of our children. But of course, our children are so smart, they are so capable, and they find ways to get around it. So I'm sure my son could find a way at 7 to get around being able to get permission from me. But that's why it's our job, our duty to get ahead of them, when they're trying to do these things. Just being mindful as parents, as caregivers, that when your child is a young elementary age child, that there are things in place so that they must get consent from you when they're signing on to these websites and apps. And so now, like I said, I'm moving through development a little bit just to say, because I want to just build up how there is an impact on why social media may be impactful to our children, like what it does for them, how it's a benefit, and then there can be some dangers to it. So then we have right now, we talked about like young children, elementary age children. And so a lot of our children that are that age, I said over 13, are utilizing social media. So let's talk a little bit about middle child development. So during this stage, our children undergo dramatic social and emotional changes. Basically, their self-esteem, it goes up and down, right? Things go up and down. And there's a big time in their life, a big comparison to their peers. So they're in this middle child developmental stage, looking at themselves and looking at others. So I want to just throw that in there. I want you to think about social media as I'm stating this, as I'm going over this developmental process for our children. They're at this place in middle childhood development where they are comparing themselves to others. And that is impacting how they see themselves, and that is causing their self-esteem to fluctuate. And so you will see that the peer relationships are actually just taking on a very prominent role, right? So you have this stage when they're really little and they're like mommy and daddy or grandma, whomever is the caregiver, and they're needing a lot from you, right? Ultimately. And so now we're in this place, we're in this middle childhood developmental place, they are looking at their peers. They're looking for that approval. They're making that comparison as we just discussed. And so I think it's very important that we are able to just understand where they are developmentally, because where they are developmentally absolutely has a great impact on how they operate on social media. So just wanting you to understand that. There's a limited ability to extend logic to abstract. Right? So there are a lot of abstract concepts and things they may not understand that they may encounter on social media. And so ultimately, there's limitations in that, because their lens and how they see the world is not how we see the world. It's very different. And so ultimately, there's limitations with that to extend things like, let me make sense of this, to take that time and dissect and apply it to something that they may not understand. So they're looking at things in a more concrete way. And obviously and absolutely, we talked about social media for our children, that it's fun and they're learning so much. So there is this interest in this stage right now in middle childhood development for learning. I want to learn, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're wanting to learn math and science, and it could be that as well, but just intrigued by learning, obtaining information about different things that they're interested in. So this is the developmental place that they're in. Just wanting to highlight dramatic social and emotional changes, self-esteem, comparison, peer relationships. Wanting to highlight that as I take you through the journey of understanding how social media will impact mental health. So I could not talk about social media. And I think in some cases, someone may not talk about gaming when they're talking about social media. But when I think about social media, I literally am thinking about socializing, connecting with others, and through media. And that is online gaming. And so ultimately, gaming, we have to be mindful. So I just want to throw this out there. I think this is important information. Gaming is a very ideal way for people who aren't doing the right thing, predators, to connect with children over that shared interest. The process of grooming happens. So when they're grooming, they are playing a game with your child online to build this trust and relationship. So we have a shared interest, this game, and we know how our children get with games. So they connect with others through gaming. And it doesn't matter, about what that person that they, from their perspective, what that person looks like or anything else, but they're connecting with them. Your child's getting connected because we're playing this game where, so in the process, someone who's not thinking of doing the right thing, who's a predator, who wants to prey on our children, will do the process of grooming. They're building this relationship through playing this game. So we have to be mindful that our children are playing these games, that they're connecting with strangers. So we're all, when we think of the gaming, they are, maybe the person who's a predator is kind of presenting the idea of we're all on the same team. This is a part of the grooming process. And I just want to give you an example. This was many years ago, but this is just an example of in the year 2012, you have companies like Microsoft, Sony, Disney. They were able to shut down 3,500 accounts of registered sex offenders. I'll repeat that. They shut down accounts of 3,500 sex offenders in a mission called Operation Game Over. So you had these sex offenders trying to attempting to connect with our children to do the grooming process. These things happen. And so as we're talking about the impact on mental health, anything that is going to threaten our children physically and their security threatens them mentally. If their safety is threatened, their security is threatened, they're threatened mentally. And so ultimately, we're being mindful, especially of our young children. I have witnessed so many situations professionally, just in my own experience of like watching videos and learning and reading of situations like that, where a child is at harm. A child does not know not to go, that they're being groomed, and they're not knowing that someone's on the other end of their gaming. They've never seen them. They don't know what they look like or sound like. It is an adult grooming and building this relationship through the gaming, where they're giving this stranger the address of where they live, or the stranger is grooming them to like build this trust to like meet up. These things happen. These things happen, absolutely happen. There are so many situations through social media where a child is being harmed because of an interaction on social media. So we just have to be mindful as parents and as caregivers of these situations. So just want to give a couple of online gaming tips. One thing is, if your children are playing games, making sure that like there are parental controls that are on every device. Even if you have a TV that, or even for like, I'll give an example, Netflix, there's parental controls on that. So you're monitoring what they're watching. And so ultimately on game consoles, there are parental controls as well. And it just gives you the ability as a parent to set some parameters for your child. We want to make sure that our children have a restriction so that strangers aren't gaining access to their profile, their information, and who they are. And I think as parents, I think this is really important as our children are playing games, like to just kind of get a feel of it. It may not be our thing and it may not be fun for us to play those games that they're interested in, but it really, I think for them as well, if we're going to protect them and make sure that they are safe, that we play the game a couple of times just to get a feel of what it looks like, the situation, what it is. I can give an example of an article I read. It probably was about 3 or 4 years ago because I was doing a presentation on social media. And I remember reading an article about the game Roblox. And in the article, the mom had a daughter, and I may be misquoting her age. She was young, maybe 7, if that, like a very young elementary age, playing Roblox. Where in Roblox, it's very creative. The players are able to create characters, build a game. And so I read this article where the mom said her daughter's playing the game. She goes on to look at what the daughter's doing. And basically, whatever game was created that her daughter was playing, in the game, there was a group of people in the game, the characters, sexually assaulting another character. This is a true story. I read, this is a legitimate article I read from a legitimate news source of this mom with her daughter playing, and her daughter's playing a game, of course, very innocently. She's a little girl, and mom, seeing what's going on, sees these characters simulating this terrible violent act against another character. So these are things that are happening. So that's why it's important. Let's see what's going on, what games are being played. And I gave that game for an example. It's a great game. The kids love it. I think so many kids are playing Roblox, I think, but just being mindful because, adults can play it. Adults sometimes pretend to be children. And then sometimes even older kids may be creating these games that are not appropriate for your child. So basically, we want to tell our children, especially, when we're starting to allow them to explore and learn about what gaming is online and play and utilize social media, that when you're encountering people online, you don't know them, that you're making a connection, but they're still strangers. There's still the idea of stranger danger, right? So we may not be physically encountering these people, but that people online, we don't know them. We don't know who we're getting on the other end. Another example that's not necessarily gaming, but I just always think about parents, caregivers. If you're watching this, the show that used to come on where, and it used to come on, and it would be where the sex offender, the predator, would pretend to be a child and then come to meet the child at a location, but it would be the reporter there and the police, because they pretended to be a kid to meet up with another child. And so I think it was called To Catch a Predator. That's what it was called. So just these situations, although that's not what we're talking about specifically today, but just the idea of making sure we're aware of who our children are connecting with through media. So I wanted to highlight, although a great source of information and resources, love watching videos, but because today we are absolutely talking about our children, we want to make sure that we are aware of how they are utilizing YouTube. I have been in situations with people, in terms of obtaining information from parents, caregivers, loved ones of children who their child has come across pornography on YouTube and watched it, and they didn't know the child's somewhere quiet watching pornography, and they think they're just watching a video, or maybe it started off as a very innocent video, and then now their child is now introduced to pornography, and that is a whole nother situation. And so remember, we're talking about physical, mental, emotional, all going together, the safety and security of how social media, how connecting socially with others online, connecting through media, how it impacts our children. So just being mindful, because there are controls on YouTube as well. So what'll happen is that there is an option even to shut off the looping of the video. So what'll happen is, let's say, for example, your child wanted to watch a video on dinosaurs, and they put the video of dinosaurs in, but then that control, that just that click of a button, if it's not clicked, this video will loop. So next time it's dinosaurs, but it's a different kind of dinosaur. Then if that video has something else in it, it loops to something else. So another example of that, I want to say my son a couple of years ago was watching, or even my daughter, I can't remember, when they were younger, Frozen, and watching videos where it was the Frozen movie characters, because I think Frozen had just come out. And then watching Frozen, and then you put the Frozen video in, and then remember, I didn't have that control on, so then it loops to the next. So now the video is not Frozen, it's adults. It's adults in Frozen character costumes. That part wasn't that bad. Then the next video looped, and I'm there looking at it. And then it's the Frozen characters, but one of the characters is pregnant. And then Spider-Man comes in. And then it becomes this whole adult type of video that was not the original cartoon that my child was watching. So being mindful of what they're taking in, what information that they're not, even if we're talking about our children getting older, so middle childhood development, where they're going on to obtain information, and maybe it's information that opens a Pandora's box. And so we have so much going on right now. And so when we specifically talk about in these conversations over the weeks, what impact does the world, social media we're talking about today, bullying have on our Black children? And so now you're on YouTube, and then there's information that may be for you harmful, because there's also comments there. And people are saying things that are racist, or people are being bullies, or it's just so much. So just being mindful that although it's a wealth of information, we want to protect them. We don't want them watching or obtaining information that's not accurate, going down rabbit holes, conspiracy theories, because they're our children, they're very impressionable, and things impact their mental health. Think about a couple of slides back talking about the idea of not in that middle childhood development, the idea of not being able to apply logic to abstract concepts. So this information they're obtaining, maybe they're not able to dissect it. How is it harmful for them mentally? We have to, or emotionally when they're watching things. And there's so much on the internet. There's so much. There are things that I just don't even want to watch myself, to take into myself, because it's harmful to me. So just being mindful of that. Talk about a few tips, a few things just for healthy usage, because we want them to utilize it, but in a healthy way. So we want to talk to them about how they're utilizing it, and like what that looks like. What does it mean for them to utilize their iPad, their computer? What does that look like? Like, want to talk to them about it. We want to acknowledge what's called the participation gap. And so just like the idea of like the age that they're in, and then the apps that they're using. We want to be mindful of what that is. There's a gap between that. So even, for example, utilizing TikTok. Remember, adults are on TikTok. So your adults on TikTok, but also your young child is on there as well. So there is this kind of gap, because this is something that we're all participating in, but there's this kind of gap there between what our children are utilizing that is beneficial to them, but then also like what they're using that may be appropriate or not for them. We have to make sure that there's a balance with other activities. And I know the challenges now, I repeat this often, because we have to, like, this conversation, is interesting. I talk about social media. This is not my first time discussing the impact for our children and presenting that information. And it looks very different now. There's so many similarities of what's going on and the harm, the dangers that are in it, but also just thinking of the time that we're in. We're in this time right now where, think about just even like a year ago, where we're now, your children are able to, like I said, go into school. A year ago, school was completely shut down. So now social media, right? Utilizing their iPad, their laptop, if they have a phone, there probably wasn't any balance. We're probably losing a lot of balance now. And I know there have been some recent like studies done on like just parents and like how they see their child's social media usage, what they're worried about, and things that are happening that they're seeing. And so ultimately, it's so important that there is a balance in spite of us being in a pandemic. And I know we want them to socialize. And I know right now, this is what we have to work with. The way that I'm talking to whomever's going to watch this through this channel this way, but there needs to be a balance. And so if we want to balance parents, caregivers, adults, then for our children, we have to have one as well. And I know sometimes in our community, we often go by the do as I say, not as I do mindset, but we're talking about children and they do not subscribe to that at all. So I think, in terms of healthy and modeling, that we have to make sure that there is a balance and that there are other activities. So ultimately, just being mindful of what that looks like, the amount of time being utilized, and making sure that there are other things going on and that screen time is not overwhelming and all-consuming. Of course, we talked about this earlier, being aware of who children are interacting with online. I think it's a very healthy thing for children to interact, to learn, and to grow, but we need to know who they're talking to online. So I know sometimes children will let their parents or caregivers know about a game or something their app they're using, and may refer to a person and go, yeah, and I was playing with my friend. Who's my friend? So parents, caregivers, loved ones, when your children are coming to you and saying and not giving specifics, we just want to be aware of who they're interacting with. We don't want children to say my friend. We want to say, who is my friend? Is it my friend John? Is it my friend Stacy? Is it my friend Keisha? Who is it? And so we want to make sure that we're aware of who they're interacting with, what their interactions are. We don't want to fear it. We don't want to have them totally not utilize it. I know it comes along with so much, and we don't want to operate from that standpoint of fear that is going to harm them. I think one of the best things that we can do is making sure that we're aware, we teach them about it, especially as we're talking about now, we're talking about younger years, introducing them to it. How are they utilizing it? We don't want to be fearful as adults about it because we utilize it. We just want to make sure that we are definitely determining their timelines. How often are you using it? How long are you using it? And setting hard boundaries. And this is what a hard boundary is. It wouldn't be saying, okay, so I want you off of it soon. Soon is very abstract. I'm wanting you to log off at 7:00 p.m. and then checking in on that and making sure that's done. I'm wanting you to not be on this game not to be on these apps at nighttime, and so the cutoff is going to be 8:00. And then to solidify that boundary, I want your devices charging in the kitchen. I want them charging in my bedroom. And so remember, with the idea of boundaries are healthy, and boundaries are created. And we have to make sure when we create those boundaries that we keep in mind that the person receiving the boundary may not like it. The boundary may be what's best, but the person in the receiving or on the receiving end of the boundary may not like it. But with boundaries, they're set for a reason. So we have to make sure that we don't fear it and that we're going to determine what the timelines are and be concrete. It is very easy, once again, referring to the time we're living in, and with everything going on, the children are in their room or they're in another part of the home and they're quiet. And it appears peaceful, but is it healthy? Because they're not jumping up and down. They're not saying they're bored. They're not bothering anyone. But is it positive and healthy for their mental health to be in a room on social media, on an app, on online gaming for 7 hours in a day? So we have to consider those things. And so what is healthy, what is beneficial? And so we're talking about the impact on mental health. That is not healthy to not have those timelines and those boundaries in place. A couple of websites I just want to pop up here. And so what happens when we talk about that participation gap, in terms of what websites, what apps, what forms of social media are appropriate for my 9-year-old? What forms are appropriate for my 13-year-old? What's appropriate for 15-year-olds? And so here are two great websites. One is commonsensemedia.org, and the other one is Safe Smart Social, a wealth of information about different apps, different forms of media. They will, I know Common Sense Media will give an age range for what, if you have an app, like your child comes to you and like mentions they're utilizing a certain app and you've never heard of it. Ultimately, what you're able to do on this Common Sense Media is get reviews, get information, a description, and then on top of that, be able to figure out whether or not it is appropriate for their usage. And so now, remember, we're transitioning down the line. So we are in adolescence. So this is just a quick, we went through middle child development. Let's talk about what the adolescent days and stages look like, AKA our preteen and teens. So this is the age range, 13 to 19 years old. There's a lot of growth going on, development, physical, social, emotional, so much going on. Body's changing, mind, brain's growing so much, have such a capacity for learning when they're in high school, what they can absorb. That's why those years are so critical. And I know all of the learning years are critical, but those high school years, what they can absorb in terms of learning, gigantic, astronomical, right? They can take in so much information and learn so much. It's a real big period of transition for them. And ultimately, puberty starts. So that everything's changing. Like I said earlier, the brain's growing, the body's changing. And so it can be a challenging time for them, a lot of growth. And then their brain continues to develop into their 20s. So we have to keep in mind that, they're at this stage where they're growing and they're changing and they're on a journey to adulthood. It's the last stop on the journey until you get to adulthood. So you got you're born, you're infant, but then it's a very, very important stage right there, right before adulthood. You're almost there. And so that brain development will continue. And we have to keep in mind of how they're responding and how they're reacting biologically. Like what's their body doing? What's their brain doing? And so basically, this is their prefrontal cortex. So the brain is developing from back to front. And so if this is the area of reason, problem solving, and this is underdeveloped, right? Then guess what's going to happen? You're going to have a lack of complex decision-making skills, planning skills, because if this is the area where this is happening, right? And this is the area where it's happening and it's developing here last, back to front. So it's not like this is the area of planning, decision-making skills, right? First, it's developing here and then going here. So that's why we see a few things from them. We're going to see impulsivity. They're going to be impulsive. They're going to be like, boom, I want to do it. Let's do it. Quick decision making. Don't understand the consequences, not fully getting it or grasping it. And so I'm going over this because we're connecting. What's the part for social media? How does this connect? How does their development as a teenager go with how they utilize social media? Think about it. I'm impulsive. I'm not impulsive because I just want to be annoying. It's really how I'm operating. And remember, all children are very different and have different experiences. So some are different than others in terms of maturity, and some are better at problem solving, decision making. So it doesn't mean that they're at a 0. It's just that these are hallmarks of their behavior during this stage, and it looks different, right, for everyone because of circumstances and situations. We know culturally, children are different due to culture. They have different experiences due to culture. So we don't want to one size fits all our children. We just want to say generally, these are things that happen biologically. Also, they know a lot, right? They do know a lot. They have the capacity, but there's things they don't know because the scope of their experiences are not that of adults. Once again, there's so much going on. Our children, our children, our Black children, our BIPOC children are having different experiences, right? Because of what's going on in the world. We think about the children who witnessed the murder of George Floyd, the 9-year-old, right? We think about even just the teenage girl who was filming. So we think about those situations where our children that look like me are exposed to so much. Their experiences are different because of that. The trauma that they're introduced to in childhood, that impacts things as well. But ultimately, it is not to disparage them as being know-it-alls. It's just more so to say they know things. They do. I have a 16-year-old. And although there's things she's so intelligent, there's things she doesn't know, but she thinks she knows. It's just a part of this growth stage that they're in. They live life in the moment. So it lives life in the moment, you know, like I said, that impulsive, not really getting the consequences. And like I said, a lot of times not getting it because of the scope of their experience. They just don't get it. Their experiences are, this is the box of the experience. And of course, as it starts in middle childhood development, where they're ultimately having that comparison to their peers, and their peer relationships are so important. Now with adolescent stages, they're becoming more and more connected to peers. They want to like spend time, talk to them, be connected to them all of the time, as much as possible. So now we see what's the impact then. So remember, I'm impulsive. I'm wanting to be around my peers. So this time period for our children, our teens, is tough. I can't go out with my friends the way that I want to. I can't connect with them in class and laugh and learn at the same time. And so now I'm on social media. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Snapchat. I'm on these things constantly because this is how I'm connecting. This is how I'm connecting. And so like, but then if it's round the clock, then they're not sleeping. There are many of our children, it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, especially now with being at home learning. Think about what's occurring. So many of our children who are not, who are learning virtually, who are not going into a building, may be assigned assignments to do and not have to log in at a certain time, or they have to log in for attendance, but then ultimately they're not like, some of our children aren't sitting in front of the screen in class all day long. Some are virtually learning throughout the day, and some are having specific Zoom sessions at certain times. So now I could be up at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. because I don't have to get up and get dressed to go out into the school building. So maybe now I'm sleeping in. I might be even missing assignments because maybe I do need to log in at 7 a.m. or 7:30, but I was up all night. So then you see sleeping impacted. If you're on social media around the clock, if I'm not sleeping, I'm at a higher risk for depression and anxiety. We're already going through a challenging time where people are feeling isolated, not being able to connect, fear of getting sick. Families are losing employment, risk of losing housing. So much is going on in family dynamics in general. And so now I'm not sleeping, which if I'm not sleeping, I'm at a higher risk to be have more anxiety, to feel more depressed. And there's this pressure that they're having to be available, right? And so when they're not able to be available, not be able to be on it, there's this increased anxiety because they're emotionally invested in social media. Many of our children, once again, I'm not saying all, but many, there's an emotional connection. I'm invested in this. I gotta go on. I gotta log on. I have to get on Snapchat. I have to post something. I have to say something. And so there's that FOMO, which is that fear of missing out. I'm missing something if I'm not on there. They're invested in it. And there's this causal path between I'm utilizing social media and then I have a lower well-being. And remember, this is not all encompassing. We're talking about like how it can impact mental health. And we're talking about in a negative way. We know it's a source of knowledge, no matter where you are, in terms of whether you're a young elementary age, you're a middle schooler, a high schooler, you're learning online, you're connecting, you're having fun. You know, I mentioned those TikTok videos, fun. You're connecting, beautiful. But we're understanding also like that usage, there could be a lower sense of well-being. So we got to think of how the adolescents will bring their self-worth to the table. Everything is about, remember, their peers, how they see themselves. So they're on there, they're trying to connect, they're comparing themselves. They're looking at who someone is, what they have, trying to measure up to something, many of them. And so how they see themselves, they're already trying to figure that out. How do I see myself? I want approval from my peers. And so when they're interacting online and socializing all of the time online, they're bringing that to the table with them. We talked about this in terms of bullying in our last session. Cyberbullying, right, still goes on. It's still online. It takes place. Any type of electronic technology, bullying can take place, right? So we got to be aware of that electronic aggression, what it looks like, the text messages, emails, and I know a lot of children aren't utilizing emails anymore, but I'm just giving examples of any way possible that, electronically they can connect, and they're chatting, and they're DMing, and so rumors posted on social media sites. I remember working in a high school as a counselor, and this is a few years ago, and every day, the children would come and talk about subbing. Like somebody was subbing. So they were knowing subbing, knowing they were talking about me, but they weren't overtly talking about me. So they were subbing. And so that would be the thing that caused so much distress in the lives of students. The idea of knowing somebody was referring to them, making fun of them, saying mean things about them, but without saying their name. And so that was causing a lot of issues in school. Videos, I mentioned in the last video of a situation a few years ago, once again, working in high school on Snapchat, where they had posted a video of the young lady with a picture of a whale over her head. And so just videos, pictures, just doing things that are not healthy online, and targeting other children, just being mindful of cyberbullying. We still got fake profiles. You'll see it on there. Sometimes even like responding and posting, but not attaching a name to it. That happens all the time. So then you can't pinpoint who it is. You can't go, say this is this person saying these things to me or posting this, because there's no affiliation or attachment of who it is. So that's the challenge with that. They were talking about, what do? We want to promote their social lives on and off screen. So now we want to make sure that, there's so much challenges now with socializing. So if they do go to school, the safety of being able to interact that way. Schools are trying to do their best in maintaining distance, but finding ways for children to socialize. I know some children are still involved in sports, but once again, in a safe way. So they want to have a healthy life off screen. And so ultimately, I know there's challenges with connecting, but we want to make sure that they know that outside of social media, outside of connecting online, they are worthy, right? They are intelligent, they have skills, we want to promote who they are and what their abilities are. We want to make sure that we're communicating with them, talking to them about just what social media is, how it's impacting them, talking about their privacy settings, and not sharing locations, and just making sure that they're keeping safe on there. And just we said there is this level of impulsivity during this developmental phase. So we want to make sure we're encouraging the meta moment. Pausing between being triggered and then responding, right? This is healthy for our mental and emotional state. We all need to do this as well. We see something, read something that's triggering. So much is going on now. The comments that I read online, I think about children are reading these things. Our children are seeing comments and being targeted. And if it agitates me and harms me, I can only imagine what it does to our children. So just basically talking to them about just that pause between being triggered and responding to something negative that they see, and being able to, as their caregiver, as their parent, as the adult in their life, talk to them about it, communicate. If we see that they're utilizing social media and they're more withdrawn, or they were utilizing it and all of a sudden they got off, it's healthy to get off, to take a break. I always recommend it, right? Because there's so much to take in, so much information, so much negativity sometimes. And with the world that we're in now, with everyone with their perspective and their opinion, and all of the negativity, a break is warranted, is needed. But if we see that they're on, even if they're like, they were on and then all of a sudden they just need to stop utilizing it. So then we need to see what is going on. What is happening? What happened? I see that you were utilizing your iPad. I haven't seen you utilize it in days. Did something happen that you needed to take a break? Just checking in about that. I think it's so important to do so. We want to teach our children to think, to think. We want to know if someone posted something, is what they're posting true or a rumor? That's that T. Is the post helpful or harmful? The H. Is the post informational or gossip, hearsay, taking us down the rabbit hole? Is the post that we're reading, is it needed or is it irrelevant? Is this needed information? This is something that's going to be, like I said, helpful. Is the post kind or harsh? And so we want to always teach them beforehand to think. We want to teach them to be critical thinkers. And that's what this social media does as well. We said earlier, even for our younger children, to critically think about information and do I need it? Is it useful? Is it harmful? And so we want to teach them to think, making sure something that they're reading online, is it true, helpful, informational, needed, kind or harsh? Got to think about that. There's a lot of things on there. And we want to protect their peace and their mental health. And sometimes reading things and not being able to decipher whether something is true, it can be very, very harmful to anyone's mental health, especially our children and how they see things. We got to be careful of what they're taking in because there's an increased usage on social media. Being aware and mindful of cyberbullying, if there's anyone trying to harm them, if they're younger predators, we got to be mindful of the information. What are they watching on YouTube that's impacting their mental health? What events, activities, things they're watching that are triggering? I noticed if in terms of mental health, even as this pandemic started, and even though we get a glimpse as adults of TikTok of the dancing and the videos, there was a lot of information on there. There are a lot of videos with people with different perspectives and information. And so I noticed that, even with my own children at the very early part of the pandemic, with all the panic and not knowing what was happening, that was causing some anxiety because there would be so many videos and so much information on there about like the fear of getting sick and what to do and what's going to happen next. And it's already, COVID-19 is already a very situation, a very fearful situation because there's so much unknown. So many of us are already operating in this fear space sometimes of not knowing. So we just want to be mindful of having these conversations, what they're taking in, that's inducing their anxiety, that's causing, they're already, like I said, feeling disconnected from peers, and peers are so big in their life, or being disconnected from family. And there's so much going on in our world socially in terms of how they see themselves. And there are people out there telling them, not telling them verbatim, but when they're taking in information, that information is saying, you're not good enough. You're not worthy to be alive. That your life is in danger because of the way that you look. So we have to be mindful of what our children are watching, what videos are saying these things, what posts are they reading. And then even, it's not just the kids are writing things that are a rumor, harmful, gossip, irrelevant, or harsh. It's our adults. Just thinking of teaching them these things. So we are going to now, as we, move forward, go into our reflection activity. And today, our reflection activity is all about just my relationship with social media. So today we're talking about our kids, but we also want to be mindful of the modeling, what they're seeing. And we want to have ourselves as adults a very healthy relationship with media. I often tell my clients, no matter what their age is that it is healthy to log off. It's okay to not be on it. There's so much, like I said, information that's not always the best information. And there's so many positive things on there as well, but it's all about balance. So I want you right now to examine your relationship with social media. Like I want you to write this down because it's very good to sometimes sit and just reflect. Reflect. That's how we learn and grow. And this is what we are modeling for our children, to reflect. That's how we, in the last slide, we talked about thinking, THINK. So when we are reflecting on something, we slow down enough and pay attention so that we can see what needs to be changing, what needs to be different. And so the first question in your journal today that I want you to take your journals out to write, how often do you use social media? Sometimes I get a glimpse of my usage and how long when I go into the controls on my phone, and it tells me the amount of time that I'm utilizing in my settings, my social media. At the end of the week, it also gives me that information of how much screen time, how much have I been online. I always try to each week make it lower than the week before, right? Because I don't want it to be all consuming. So how often do you use it? Which apps do you use? And what are the reasons you're choosing to utilize those apps? I want you to really reflect on that. So when you're on, you're utilizing it for a reason. So you're choosing Twitter, or whether it's Instagram, if it's Facebook, if it's Snapchat, if it's TikTok. What are the reasons you utilize those? Sometimes we get an account and we collect them. We have a lot. The next question in your journal entry will be, do you ever find yourself making comparisons to yourself and the people that you see? And this is important information because the way that we can utilize this reflection is how we help our children. How does it impact us? When I work with adults and they tell me they have to take a break from it, or they can't utilize it, or how it harmed them, or they read something and how it messed up their day, that could be our children. So we want to protect them. We want to protect their peace. Once again, their mental health. We don't want something to distress them, and we not be aware of what that is. So we're reflecting to see how, because this is something that we're all utilizing. And so we want to be mindful of how, if it works that way for us, how might it work for our children who don't have the experiences, who may not have the critical thinking and problem solving skills that we have at our age. So do you find yourself making comparisons? And it's hard not to do that, to go on there and look at yourself, your body, how your hair is, or anything else, and make those comparisons, being mindful of that. Even when I see #couple goals, I'm not sure why something is a goal because of a snapshot of something. When we're saying hashtag that something is a goal, we don't know the behind the scenes of that. We don't know the inner workings of that man or that woman or whatever that couple is. We have, through social media, snapshots. That's what we want to teach our children so that they remain mentally and emotionally healthy. And because they're already in a stage of life where they're comparing, we want them to be mindful of that what you're seeing, those are snapshots. We do not know what goes on behind closed doors. And so we don't want to compare, because it's always going to be an apple and an orange, or an apple and a cell phone, just things that don't match up, because your reality, your world, who you are, is not the same as someone online. And that's okay, because it's not supposed to be. So just want you to reflect on that. Do you yourself make any comparisons? And I think we've all done it at some point, but we want to see how much of it we're doing and what we're comparing. Then your last question is, when using social media, how does it make you feel? What do you feel like? Do you feel inspired, motivated, sad? Do you feel what are your feelings? I want you to really tap into that, because once again, we're doing this so we're reflecting on it. As adults, those watching this are probably of that age, right? Of adulthood, just reflecting on your usage so that we can be mindful, so that we can direct our children appropriately. So just wanting you to answer these prompts and see what you come up with. So once again, please take into consideration everything we talked about today, and understanding that social media can be very beneficial. There are benefits. Remember, we're acknowledging the benefits, right? While considering the risks that happen And think about how fragile our children are. And so what they're taking in when they're watching or looking at videos or reading something, what they're taking in, who they're interacting with, then being very reflective of how we're using it. Because remember, we're wanting to protect them physically, mentally, emotionally. We're not wanting them to be on it all night long, losing sleep, increasing anxiety during an already anxious time of life right now. So just being mindful of what those benefits are, what those dangers, or what those risks are. So I thank you today for listening to us basically having a discussion, because we're having a discussion, even though it's just me talking to you about how social media impacts our children and impacts us. As always, take care of yourself, take care of each other. And we've been talking about our children for the past 4 weeks. So take care of our children and be well. See you next time.